God is amazing in the way that our bodies are wired. When attacked by a ferocious lion or lifting a car off of a crash victim, our brains send chemicals that change the blood flow from our brains and organs to our muscles. This is great for spur-of-the-moment emergencies. But what happens when we feel threatened without wild beasts or car crashes? Stay tuned as we delve into a modern dilemma of, you may have guessed it by now, stress. Our Old Testament reading is Exodus 20, 8 through 11. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. But the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Our gospel reading is Matthew 8, 23 through 27. And then he got into the boat, and his disciples followed him. Suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake, and so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Lord, save us, we're going to drown." And he replied, "You have little faith. Why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and was completely calm. And the men were amazed, and they asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, to say that stress is a part of our everyday lives may be an understatement. There's always been stress, but it has taken different forms through the years. Years ago, things like where the next meal comes from were stressful. When your meals in the winter were dependent upon your garden or your farm, and it hasn't rained for a month, this is stress. These days, broken families and broken relationships with our loved ones can wear on our minds. Children are living in a world in which it can seem like we don't have much control. It's a different world than the one we grew up in. Some of them are self-destructive and consume a variety of drugs and engage in addictions of technology stimulus. The welfare of our loved ones can keep us up at night. The economy has been a roller coaster. When jobs finally seem available in this business world, we're often only as good as our last deal. Some people work excessive hours just trying to make ends meet, supplying the perceived needs of their families. Some are insecure of their incomes, or the amount of their income and the demands we sense. Some people tend to internalize these problems and end up feeling isolated from others, and sometimes even isolated from God. These hard times can also build resentment that snowballs in a person's mind, eroding a person from the inside out. A person can end up feeling alone, depressed, exhausted, and burned out. Trying to carry these burdens to the already overly ramped up demands ends up being counterproductive. Stress is an odd thing in the way that it consumes a person in a funnel cloud and downward cycle of dissolving not only our happiness, but our productivity as well. The cycle takes place where pressure is present and a person tries to work with an unrelenting drive to resolve it. Taken too far, this wears a person out and actually makes them function less efficiently. This puts a person farther behind, creates more pressure, which makes a person work harder, which wears them thinner, which puts them behind, which creates more pressure, which makes a person work harder, which wears them out more, which puts them further behind, which creates more pressure, which makes a person work harder, which wears them out even more, which puts them further behind, which I hope you're seeing the pattern here. What becomes missing is a balance in life. The consumption of work eliminates the relaxation and recreation that's needed to create health and strength that's needed to meet today's demands. Even though it doesn't seem to make sense, working less can make us able to work better and accomplish more. The old adage of all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy is really ringing in my ears. The book Stress Relief by Randy Reynolds and David Lynn has been a great help in my understanding of coping with stress. Many of their thoughts have been incorporated within this message. So while stress is ever present, it's important to see it when it becomes damaging and consuming. Stress can become apparent through the following symptoms. If you feel that you share these symptoms, you may be caught in this vicious downward spiral. Excessive tension can manifest itself in tight shoulders and frequent headaches. Insomnia, overeating, undereating, loss of concentration, increased desire for sugar, alcohol, or caffeine, loss of interest or drive, feeling overwhelmed or overextended, and feeling used are all symptoms of exhaustion. Common triggers include loss or major changes in a person's life. Excessive demands, constant threats, feeling trapped, all can lead to burnout. Chronic pain, both physically and mentally speaking, can drive a person to wit's end. I would really like for you to consider what the consequences of ignoring these symptoms of stress and what their causes are. Does it cause you to burst out in anger at loved ones? Does it cause you to make poor decisions due to being exhausted? Again, what are the consequences of ignoring stress in your life? The production line completely changed manufacturing in America. And then it trickled out to the entire world. Each part of a particular process needs completed, and then the project moves to the next step, then to the next, and so on. Care must be taken in organizing the line to flow smoothly. If one part of the line moves too fast, and the next operates too slowly, a bottleneck forms, and the line backs up and becomes less efficient. Please consider what the bottlenecks or pinch points in your lives are. These are the areas in which you may need the most help. It might be helpful to recognize 4 stages of stress. The first, you become irritable and easily frustrated. You may feel as though you're getting stuck in a rut. You may also experience a sense of being taken advantage of or have feelings of resentment. 2, the intensity level increases. You may feel a loss of freedom or feel like your life is controlled by outside forces. A sense of bitterness develops. Physical symptoms include a loss of sleep, change in eating habits, lack of concentration, nail biting, or a desire to isolate. You may also experience fantasies of escape from feeling trapped. 3, the intensity increases even more. A person may experience feelings of depression, suicide, or the desire that other people would die. Feelings of hatred and vindictiveness can consume a person. Symptoms include behavior patterns, eating or drinking too much, working overly long hours, becoming overly religious, and obsessive cleaning illustrate these feelings of desperation, pain, or depression. 4, exhaustion. It leads to total breakdown, Heart attacks and panic attacks can be some of the symptoms that infest one's life. This overwhelming feeling interferes in day-to-day function. Phobias or fears may become consuming. It's important to realize these levels and how they engage in a person's life. If a cycle of stress can be caught early enough and creatively dealt with, it will actually reverse the process rather than escalate the problem. Negative emotions, namely hate, fear, panic, rage, despair, depression, exasperation, and frustration, are damaging to a person's mind and even affect the body's chemistry in negative ways. Positive emotions, namely purpose, determination, love, hope, faith, will to live, and festivity are good for a person and actually cause physical and psychological healing. While a person wants to consider what emotions they experience, they should try to surround themselves with people who, for the most part, share positive emotions. The sense of love and support can become instrumental in a person's sense of value in healing. Speaking of adaptations to stress, some interesting cycles develop. As we mentioned, stress is ever present in our lives and has been present throughout humans' history. Some people refer to it as a fight and flight response. At any rate, one thing or another presents a stress or an arousal within our lives. The body ramps up its mojo to handle this stress. Adrenaline is released to give superhuman powers. Cortisol is released to decrease inflammation in your muscles, increasing muscle tension, and it gets the blood sugars racing through your veins. The next step is activation, which puts the adrenaline and cortisol to use. A person may want to note that a person under stress or this arousal and activation cycle needs to burn off these chemicals in their bodies, or there's negative effects. So if the arousal is something that uses the brain rather than the body to solve, something physical needs done to use up the chemicals in our bodies. The final stage of a healthy cycle in this dynamic recovery is the time of rest or recuperation. Another important note is that the body automatically kicks into the arousal and activation mode, but it does not automatically start the recovery mode. If the recovery mode is not included before the next stress cycle begins, the body and the mind actually become damaged. This cycle is part of living, and as long as all three dynamics occur, arousal, activation, and recovery, a person feels good completing these steps in life. Unfortunately, some people become addicted to the adrenaline and cortisol drugs racing through their system. They don't realize it, but they chase tension just to get this rush. Most of the time, the recovery stage is omitted as they're in a hurry to get the next dose of their addiction. These people get mad easily and love excessive drama as a trigger to keep the body delivering these addictive drugs within their symptoms. Without the recovery process involved, a person becomes damaged, weak, and frail. Panic attacks can be a result of overwhelming adrenaline flushes, and that can be very debilitating. The consequences of not taking a break or Sabbath cause an unwanted cycle of unrelieved stress in a person's life. Recovering addicts use the acronym of HALT to remember the times when a person is most likely to get sucked into this unbroken cycle of stress. H represents hunger. A represents angry. L represents lonely. And T represents tired. It's wise to be as productive as possible and not allowing any of these HALT characteristics to open the door of trouble in our lives. We should try to stay away from becoming too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. 5 tools that are helpful in breaking the destructive stress cycles are disengaging, finding safety, celebration, quiet reflection, and finally, hope and restoration. A sign on the Alaskan highway says, "Pick your route carefully. You'll be in it for the next 1,000 miles." The first step in breaking the destructive cycle is to break up the rhythm of our work and worries. Disengaging is a critical step, and it doesn't seem to come naturally to many. Many of us have been raised with a strong work ethic. We tend to believe that more is more. More problems require more work. Sometimes it can seem that if we take a break from our problems during stressful times, we can feel guilty and confused. In truth, this leaves us burned out and exhausted and damaged. We end up in worse shape to help ourselves or those we love. It's difficult to grasp, but sometimes less is more. By taking a healthy break from stressful situations, our bodies have a chance to heal and strengthen to better handle our challenges. Work is important, and ignoring problems doesn't solve anything, but there needs to be this balance, or the consequences can be severe. There are so many references in the Bible about God being a rock and a refuge. Excuse me. Time spent with God gives a person a safe place to be. This is time to heal, becoming comforted and rejuvenated. There are 2 types of arousal that should receive special attention. The first type of arousal begins with anger, irritation, frustration, and rage. This type of activation often results in feelings or actions involving yelling, swearing, and even throwing things. In the last cycle of this phrase, it leaves feelings of remorse and guilt. Another type of arousal to consider is the stimulus of fear, panic, and inadequacy. This arousal can activate talking anxiously, withdrawal, or a feeling of just wanting to give up. The aftermath of this cycle is feeling tired, helpless, and or depressed. To escape from these negative arousal cycles, a person needs to make a point of finding refuge in God's love, forgiveness, and protection, even or especially in the midst of troubles. Another tool to help break the destructive cycle of stress is celebration. Celebration looks at accomplishment and it implies gratitude. Laughing actually stimulates the brain to release pain, relieving chemicals. When we get in the when we get stuck in the rut of taking ourselves too seriously, we become in danger of letting celebration and laughter slip away from our grasp. When we look at Jesus' life during his ministry, there were times of plenty after busy and hectic days that Jesus would just slide off by himself to pray. This taking time to be alone with God is a great way to help recovery from our stressful situations. Finally, the last area we examine today is the thought of hope and restoration. A lot of stress in our lives is caused by loss of control, loss of financial freedom, loss of emotional stability, loss of productivity, loss of relationship, and loss of dreams, to name a few. Many may not realize it, but hope is a choice. We can choose to hope because we can have faith that God can and will provide for us and direct us. We've seen it in the lives of others, and we can see this in our own lives if we step out in faith and experience this gift. Some choose not to hope, and I would venture to say this is one of the most depressing and debilitating feelings a person can experience. With God, there is hope. With God, all things are possible within his will. Women nearly 100 years old have borne their first child. Blind people can be helped to see. Lepers are cleansed. Our pains, scars, and wounds can become healed and even transform, causing positive growth. With God, all things are possible. There was a Neil Young album entitled Rust Never Sleeps. Our stress can become like rust if we let it. Stress can erode and dissolve every fiber, leaving us feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, angry, or beaten. We actually become less effective, even though we're trying harder. It's like sinking in quicksand. The more we panic and faster we move, the deeper we sink, with less chance of coming out. We need to find this balance. Once again, we need to find balance within our lives. As stress builds, we need to make sure we disengage, find safety, celebration, quiet reflection, and finally engage in hope and restoration. In the midst of our troubles, we need to take a few moments to set them aside and recharge our batteries. Although watching TV can seem like a break, it can actually add to a problem. Tests show that it often stimulates a person's mind, but never actually gives the mind a rest or gives the body exercise that burns off this excessive adrenaline and cortisone that builds up from the stimulation. What a person actually needs to do is step aside from the problem for a bit. Step away from the screens. Within this time, a person can find safety and solitude, spending time with God, or spending joyful time and safe time with people they love. Celebrations, sharing victories with humble gratitude towards God can revive a person from the inside out. Another relief is to follow the example of Jesus and go to some place alone and spend special time with God our Father. Remember to relax and listen when we're praying or having conversation with our Father in heaven, who loves us so dearly. Finally, choose hope. Hope gives us a feeling of promise of better days. Hope implies faith in God. It implies a trust in God that He will provide and take care of us through a future that we can't see. This brings us peace in the midst of our storms. When you're frustrated and ready to scream your head off or throw tools or plates, remember, less is more. Balance is the key. Give God a chance to intervene and help while we bring our hearts, minds, and souls to restoration. May God bless us and those we love as we let the touch of His peace breathe life into our tired souls. Amen.